Devious, in this edition today, CEO of Ethiopian Agricultural Transformation Institute, Dr. Mandefro Neguse, insight as work is being undergone by the Institute. Here are the mandates of the Institute.
The mandates of the Institute are four. The first one is identifying systemic bottlenecks of the agriculture sector and then proposing a solution. Second one is providing implementation support to transformation agents or institutions working on the value chain. The third mission or the third mandate is testing innovations, testing technologies, testing science results. So anything related to science, technology, and innovation are drivers of transformation, and we test. And whenever we identify productive technology or innovation, then that will go into the farming system or that will go into a scale. So that is the third mandate. The fourth mandate is connecting the different actors along the value chain. Like it could be investors of any sort or any size and connecting with producers. So just to give you an example, we have producers that are organized into some sort of clusters and they produce a certain commodity and supply to industry, for example, for agro-industry or for a processing plant of a private sector or a public sector. So connecting the different dots along the value chain is the fourth mandate that we have. So when the name agency was changed into an institute with proclamation 1243 of the Ethiopian government, the nature of our work and the mission given to the institute doesn't look like an agency. It's not an agent, but rather it's an institute working on some sort of study, some sort of consultancy works, some sort of promotion of science, technology, and innovation. Then that's why we are given the name an institute.
The impact of climate change on agricultural productivity.
Climate change is happening. This is something we can see over time. So the change, although the name climate change is commonly known, there are elements of climate change that contributes to the change in the climate variables. So one of those variables is a rainfall. Another variable is a temperature. So as the temperature changes and the rainfall changes, the climate changes over time. So when climate changes, if you don't change the way you operate, if you don't change the technology that you are using, if you don't change innovations, then climate change impacts what you are working on. Specifically, agriculture is very liable to the change in climate change. So it can affect positively if you are ready for adaptation and mitigation. If not, you would be affected negatively because the change doesn't support existing situations. So that is how I see climate change. Climate change for some countries or for some localities is a positive change, and that has a positive gain or that has a positive impact. In some places, climate change has a negative effect on the livelihood of the community, on the lives of the community, on the incomes of the community, on the productivity of the community in certain areas. For example, in Ethiopia, in area where we have drought, in the drought-prone area, that negatively affects the lives and livelihoods of the community living in the drought-prone areas. In some places, climate change as a result of change in the rainfall pattern could be an advantage. Temperature, when you have an increased temperature, you can grow some commodities that you don't have the option to grow. So that's why the lowland crops are moving towards mid-altitude and then towards high altitude because of the change in temperature. So climate change has positive elements or positive impacts or positive effects. In some places it has negative effects. So globally it is happening. So the scope is widening in terms of the commodity that we used to work on when we were as an agency. Now we have many more crops coming in the innovation, in the cluster. One of the work of Agricultural Transformation Agency, and that we will continue working on as an institute, is cluster farming, which means land consolidation, where we would like to imitate commercialization. So with the cluster approach, you have mechanization, you have improved seed, fertilizer and agrochemicals, and you have aggregation, warehousing, and so on. So commercialization of agriculture can come as a result of cluster farming. So the expansion in terms of the number of commodities, the expansion in terms of the number of weredas throughout the country, and the expansion of even regional estates. When it was an agency, used to work on only 4 regions. Now we are operating on 8 regions. So the scope has changed, and the content in terms of the commodity that we are tackling has changed, and the responsibility has also changed. So from the Ministry of Agriculture, we are given a mandate to coordinate policy changes in the agriculture and rural development. We're also providing secretarial services for food system transformation of the country. And we're also coordinating digital agriculture. So digitization, transforming Ethiopian food system, and agriculture and rural development policy instrument development are the key elements that are added to the mandates of the agency. So in short, the mandate has expanded in terms of scope, in terms of geography, in terms of the commodity that we are using, and the responsibility given at the national level is also growing. As a result of that, we have a growth in terms of workforce, and we also have growth in terms of funding.
Wheat cluster trend in Ethiopia.
So wheat is one of the commodity that Agricultural Transformation is working on, which means we have farmers organized into clusters to produce wheat, both during the rainfall time, which means during the main cropping season, as well as using irrigation. There is also an expansion into acid-affected soils, and it's also being expanded to waterlogging areas. So these 4 pillars, which means under rainfed, in acid-affected areas, in waterlogged areas, and production of wheat in irrigated areas, these are expansion during the last 4 or 5 years. So which means we are moving from a deficit towards a surplus wheat production. So agricultural transformation as a lead in terms of cluster farming is also working on this wheat initiative, and we are very happy that we are taking a shape where Ethiopia is being self-sufficient in wheat production and consumption, where production and consumption has a positive net effect now. So Currently, we have 11 strategic commodities selected for food security, for export as a raw material for local industries. So what do we need? We need mechanization, where we have tractor for land preparation, tractor mounted planting, tractor mounted herbicide application, as well as combiner based harvesting. So mechanization is one of the area where Agricultural Transformation Institute is working on. So what is our contribution? We have constructed 10 mechanization service centers. Why do we need the mechanization service center? These are training centers that certify operators and technicians that are working on maintenance of tractors and other farm machineries like combiners. Secondly, in addition to providing training, these mechanization service centers are owned by union in different regions. Then they have their own farm machineries and they provide service and they generate income. That's the second function of the mechanization service center. The third function of the mechanization service center is providing spare parts. They import and distribute spare parts. So this being on the mechanization side, we're also dealing with improved seed of these 11 crops. What do we provide? We support the research system to produce more early generation seed, like a breeder seed, pre-basic seed, and basic seed. Then we connect the research results with private seed companies or public seed companies to get early generation seed and produce certified seed. Then the certified seed will go to the cluster farming. So that is the seed value chain that Agricultural Transformation Institute is supporting. So for the producers, specifically for cooperative-based seed producers, we provide construction of warehouses and seed cleaning machines, seed packaging machines, and we have this in the different cluster farming areas. So the mechanization plus the seed production companies will support commercialization of the agriculture sector, which will end up transforming agriculture in Ethiopia.
Agricultural mechanization.
As I said earlier, the commercialization, which is a basic condition for transformation, is based both on rain-fed as well as irrigation. So when the climate change and the rainfall is low in terms of quantity or very variable in terms of distribution, it affects the commercial cluster farming. So it affects yield, it affects productivity and the total production. And this being on the rainfall side, when the amount of water reduces both on the surface and groundwater, then our ability to provide irrigation water for the cluster farmer becomes low. So climate change affects the productivity and production of the agricultural commodity, both for crops and livestock, which means it affects the national economy. Because productivity and income would be aggregated at a community level, then at a warada level, a zonal level, regional level, and finally at a national level. So what we export will reduce as a result of climate change. What we channel to our food security, some of the community that we are serving might slide to food insecurity, and the amount of raw materials being provided to the agro industry might reduce as a result of climate change. So climate change is one of the challenges that affects the agricultural GDP growth. So as the rainfall varies, our production and productivity also varies. So the strategy going forward is to really focus on irrigation and put up infrastructure for irrigation. Then in terms of varying rainfall, if you have irrigation, you can supplement your farm. If you have irrigation, you can produce throughout the year, not just once, but twice, in some places maybe 3 times. So climate change, it is reflected on the rainfall pattern, and that affects crop productivity as well as livestock productivity. As a result of forage productivity will go down.
What does it mean by climate resilient agriculture?
So some people do say climate resilient, some people say climate smart, some people say regenerative. So it has different names, which means when the climate change, you need to change your farming system. When the climate change, you need to change the variety that you are growing and the way you operate farm. So it means the change in climate should not affect your productivity and income of the farming community. In order to do that, you need to have a knowledge-based recommendation, science, technology, and innovation to support the resilience capacity of the farming community. So it requires investment, it requires research results, it requires technologies, and it requires innovations to offset the effect of climate change. So resilience means building a capacity whenever there is a climate change shock, you can resist it. So that's the meaning of climate resilience agriculture, or climate resilience economy, or climate resilient community. So when it happens, the shock doesn't affect significantly the livelihood of a community, the income and the productivity of the community. So when the climate change, so you need to change your practice, you need to change your policy, you need to change your technology and innovation.
The unique features of cluster farming in Ethiopia.
Yeah, so, well, there is no copy-paste. I mean, we have a different context compared to other countries. And we have a different setup, we have a different geography, we have a different rainfall. So the technology is generated by the research system, Ethiopian Institute of Agricultural Research. And the technology was promoted by first 3 institutions. So Ethiopian Institute of Agricultural Research, Ministry of Agriculture, and ATA at that time, ATI now. So these 3 institutions got together and promoted the initial in 2019. So we began with a very small hectarage, 3,502 hectares. Then now we have 1.3 million hectares, mainly in Oromia region. Of the 1.3 and 1.1 million is in Oromia region, so the rest is in different regions. So Oromia also started with 3,000 hectares of land, and now within 4 years of time we reach at this level, but there is no copy-paste, but it depended on the local technology, and we have our subject matter specialists, development agents, and farmers producing irrigated wheat in the lowland. Then it moved to a mid altitude, and now we have wheat even in the highlands. So it's through testing and validation that we went from lowland that began in Afar, and now we have in the highland, in the central Oromia, we have wheat under irrigation. So it is not, of course, but the experience is worldwide. Irrigated wheat is not just in Ethiopia, but we have the experience in Mexico, we have the experience in Sudan, in Egypt, in Morocco. So there are many countries producing wheat using irrigated water. And we are using now our natural resources to respond to the needs of the community of our country.
To what extent ATI contributed to the betterment of Ethiopian agricultural productivity?
Yeah, so the 10-year performance of ATA was evaluated by international institutes, one of the CG Center called FPRI, and the contribution of ATA was labeled there as $1.7 billion to the national GDP, which means you contribute 1.7 of the GDP of the country. And it also employs, we have different projects. Each of these projects do have different figures. In commercialization cluster, we have about 3 million farm households in these crops. And with digital agriculture, we have 6.3 million. With digital inputs like seed and fertilizer, we have 7 million farm households that are being served with ATI innovations, ATI systems. So in totality, we are a significant contributor of the agriculture sector in terms of increasing productivity, testing innovation, and connecting the different pieces. So we connect the producer with the processor, we connect the producer with aggregators and exporters. So there is a significant contribution of Agricultural Transformation Institute. And we also have our presence in regional states. We have Agricultural Transformation Institute in Oromia region, in Amhara region, in Tigray, in South. So the contribution of ATA in terms of cluster farming is very significant.
ATS collaboration with other stakeholders.
So currently we work on 11 crops. Wheat is one of those 11 crops. We work on maize, we work on teff, we work on sesame, on soybean from the grain side. We also work on avocado, mango and banana on the fruit side, onion and tomato on the vegetable side. So these 11 crops are being produced using cluster farming as an approach nationally. So that is what we do. When we test the innovation, then it will be scaled up by the bureaus of agriculture at the regional states, at the zonal, warada, and Kabale level. So our role is testing and validating. Once we prove the technology is working, the innovation is working, we hand over that to the actual implementers, the regional bureaus of agriculture. We operate as a team. Although we have different institutions with defined roles, we operate as an agriculture sector, and we call that agriculture family. Not, we have the research, we have ATI, we have Ministry of Agriculture, we have seed enterprises, we have many public institutions that are operating within a specific geography as well as at national level. So although we have different names and different roles within the agriculture value chain, we operate as a family and we work together. The modality of operation, the research generates technology. We test and validate the technology, and what is validated is being scaled up by bureaus of agriculture. So that is the chain. So the source of technology, validation of the technology, and the scaling up of the technology at the farming level. So that's how we operate.